There we go. When I go out to a project, these are some of the areas that are inspected. I'll walk the project site. I'll look at all the disturbed areas, any areas that are being excavated. I look for stormwater control measures. Basically, anywhere the water can flow. I will also look beyond the project site. Sometimes when we have one of these hellacious rains and I've got an inspection schedule, I get a call saying, "Are you still coming?" The answer is yes, for two reasons. One, the inspection schedule is like a jigsaw puzzle and I only have limited number of days and lots of projects. But the other answer is because that's the best time to look at your project site is when it's raining. For instance, just Monday, we went out to a site. And because of a heavy rain, we found an area that had a potential problem. It was not evident to anybody on that site before they had a heavy rain, but it showed up after the heavy rain. When I say all disturbed areas, this is a definition out of HAR 1155. Basically, disturbance is anywhere where you've touched it. For paving projects, when it is included in your disturbed area is when you're exposing the base course or bare soil or ground surface. Just a little cold planing and repaving is not necessarily considered disturbance. But notice all these other areas. Sediment control, we're going to talk about inlet protection. We're also going to talk about general perimeter and basic protection. When you look at what you're going to use on the site, DOH has said we can use anything commercially available, provided it's appropriate to the situation and it's installed per manufacturer's specifications. If I look in a SWIP and I see a new product and they don't have the installation instructions there, I go to the website and I will download the installation instructions so I know how that device is supposed to be installed. When you send it to the field, send the installation instructions with the guy that's going to do the installation. And you definitely read the fine print, and I'll give you some examples of why that's important. If you're going to construct your own devices, you need to have them spec'd out in your SWIP for approval. You heard in our keynote speaker this morning, layered approach. That is extremely important. Inlet protection cannot be your only line of defense. We regularly pull when we have heavy rain events because of all the repaving on the roads. We have some roads that traditionally flood. Here's a very simplistic example of a layered approach. The one on the left, during a heavy rain event, that could wash over the sidewalk. Heavy rain events predicted, we're pulling inlet protection on that street. The fact that you were told the inlet protection to be pulled and you have soil running over that sidewalk will not protect you from fines for discharging to the inlets. So they placed protection to prevent the sediment from running over the sidewalk. I'm going to harp on this. Inlet protection is the last line, not the only line. Layered approach. There's the definition of a critical deficiency. Notice what I bolded and underlined at the bottom. Generated by construction activities. A construction activity is your water truck with potable water. If that water goes into an inlet, regardless of whether you have protection or not, That's a critical deficiency. Here's some examples of 3 critical deficiencies we've caught. The one on the left is pretty explicit. They had excavated further up the slope, exposing the base course, and it rained for like 20 minutes, really heavy downpour before I walked out to this area. Nothing up there. You can see the puddle still up there. It ran into an inlet without any inlet protection. The next 2 were actually cold planing problems. The one in the middle, they filled their cold plane with potable water, overfilled it, ran off the drip pad, down the sidewalk, and into the inlet. It was ruled a critical deficiency. That was construction water going into that inlet. On the right, again, this was caused by a cold planer sitting stationary grinding. We use water in a cold planer to prevent dust, but when you're doing a static grinding, it builds up, it overflowed into the gutter and into the drain. We popped the top, and it was running down the face of the box. This is out of the instructions for the curb inlet dam. It reduces sediment. It mitigates sediment and rock. It does not say eliminate or prevent. Graded drain inlets, 3 different types we generally have here. The one in the middle is what causes the most problem. It does not have a frame all the way around it. If you get out a magnifying glass, you can read these in your handout at your leisure with just some examples. Ultra drain guard. Gravity forces the water through the fabric. It also has overflow cutouts in the event of a severe rain. It is, however, difficult to clean because it takes multiple people to pull that puppy out and clean the back. Here's an example of the advantage over fabric just under the grate. The fabric clogs up with soil. It no longer perks. The water is going to bypass to the next spot. The one on the right, this was during a heavy downpour. That's an ultra drain guard. It's going in. It's not traveling beyond the inlet. If you're just using biosock and snake bags or snake bags, you need to watch for them breaking open. That becomes a source of pollution into the drain if you don't have anything to catch it. The other thing, inspection 101 tactic, get rid of the weeds, especially in front of catch basins. If you have weeds growing in front of your inlet protection, that tells the inspector you have not been doing regular maintenance. So weed your inlets. On the right, we have a lot of GDIs where we're paving. After the paver has finished for the day, not the project, for the day, you need to go back and clean out the inlets. Asphalt does not filter water. Common problem with the GDIs that don't have the frame all the way around. The fabric drops down into the inlet because there's nothing to wedge it against the walls of the inlet. And then you end up with a gap in the protection. This is really a problem when inlets are in the traffic pattern because the traffic abrades the fabric. Here's 2 examples that we finally found that seem to work. The one on the left will work in not high traffic areas. What they did is they took a piece of wood and shimmed it to hold the fabric tight against it. The one on the right, that's actually a 2x4 in there that's wedging the fabric to the wall. You need to place that wedge inside the fabric so the fabric is against the wall. Obviously, that drain's not going to get much water right now, but it was the best picture of that situation that I had. Catch basins. The one left with directional channels is tough to protect. Again, some advantages and disadvantages of various inlet protection that you can read at your leisure. If you're protecting an inlet, I will look at the positioning of the inlet protection device. If you're using biosocks or snake bags and you happen to put something behind it to keep it in place and from falling into the inlet, because on newly worked roads you have a big mouth, you need to make sure that your protection comes all the way around. Notice the water flow direction. What they used in this case was a sign upright. These things are hollow and they have holes. It's going to not do much of anything there. A lot of people are using curb inlet guards. I talked about this last year. You need to read the fine print. What's on the right is in the fine print. You have gravel bags at each end and at each overlap. You should use 1/3 filled gravel bags. Now, a lot of times those green snake bags that are filled with gravel, they're like a log. You actually should not fill those bags as full as a lot of companies do. Car runs over them, they can burst like a balloon. Less fill, they can squish around when the cars run over them. The big thing is you have to use gravel, not sand. It specifically says do not use sand. It does not say how far you need to put it beyond the throat of that catch basin, but a good rule of thumb is about 4 to 6 inches. Because as traffic hits it, it's going to move. So you want to maintain coverage of it. Curb inlet dams. This goes back to sending the installation instructions to the field. The one on the left is installed correctly. This one in the middle is not, but it looks like the one on the left. Because I looked at the picture and said, okay, it needs to come over to here. In actuality, it's too short. If the installation directions had gone to the field, they would see you're supposed to bend it back and shove it in and wedge it in the box. These things also work well in high flow rates. Because of that cutout right there, if the water builds up, it will overflow into the inlet. Curb inlet guards also work well, but the problem with those is that mesh screen. If you have a lot of vegetation coming down, it just plasters against that metal, that plastic screen, and eventually clogs. With directional channels, you need to make sure that whatever you're using, the spaces in those directional channels are plugged. Well, the easiest way to do that is they wedge fabric under the standing bag. Culverts, swales, and ditches. Need to protect, you can use biosocks all the way around, check dams, and these are 3 examples of check dams in the swales. Culverts. A lot of times I get a SWIP and it shows just a little bitty biosock right there around the head wall, either in a U shape towards the road or away. It doesn't do any good because the water has to hit that dead on. What about the water coming this way? I couldn't find the picture I was looking for, but a lot of these, the edge of the culvert is actually downslope of the swale. You need to protect all the way around. For instance, if that was here, you would have the water coming down here and running in there. If you have culverts in a high flow area, consider a double layer, even though your SWIP might say only a single layer of sandbags. If it's a really high flow area or at the bottom of your slope, you might want to consider digging a pit in front of it. Also, for example, these are like 10-foot gravel bags. They're very heavy. If you're using that in front of a culvert, you might want to maybe sink a piece of rebar up here and tie the end of it. On one project, they had to climb through some culverts to retrieve their bags after extremely heavy rain. Check dams. They're great for slowing water. You need to think smile. What I'm looking for is that it's lower in the center than the edges. You want to channel the water. If you're making it out of rock, rock should be 8 to 12 inches. General perimeter control. You need to have layered approach. And not all commercial devices are appropriate for the situation. You have to prevent sediment-laden runoff from leaving the project site. And you have to look beyond the edge of your project to see if there's any way you can impact on something else. Like, is there a drain 20 feet beyond the perimeter? Choose the method fit the site, install per manufacturer's spec, and this will overlap with the erosion control. Some various devices. Here's an example of bad choice. Biosocks and snake bags. Everybody's using Biosock. A Biosock at the end of a slope does not work well. In this case, we had a very unstable slope, very steep slope. Notice the pile here. That's an inlet. This was mostly good, similar type slope. What they did is they had 2 layers of silt fence, and silt fence would have been better on the other slope. But if you use 2 layers, you need to space them far enough apart so if one goes, it doesn't take the others with them. If you have a steep slope, this again, it goes to layered approach. You need to prevent sheet flow from over top of that. You need to prevent sediment from leaving the area. This one has biosocks at the top to prevent sheet flow, intermittent dissipation devices, which are required by Section 209 for any slope over 15 feet. And they put biosocks down here. Our biosocks here are usually filled with mulch. They are light. They float until they become saturated. They should be staked down, regardless of what they say in the literature. The 4-to-1 or greater slope is for compost socks, which are much heavier. Under here is an inlet, by the way. Notice how everything came down. Biosocks installation. There is a method when you have with the overlap, which is 6 inches between adjoining sections. You got your flow this way. This one is the proper direction. This one, the downslope is inside, the one upslope, that's not proper. If you think about this one kicking the water back into the site, you'll install them correctly. Here, water running down can run through the overlap to the outside of the project. Pro wattles are being used. They need to be interconnected, sit flat on the ground. A rock under a pro wattle is not proper installation. This is also very badly backfilled. It doesn't say in the directions, it doesn't say that you need to compact it, but do the 250 compaction. Get your big guy to go stomp along at the edge of it. It'll help when you have a rain. There is a green filter fabric inside. When that gets cut or holes, you have to replace the entire section of pro wattle. It's not repairable. If you're doing excavation in an area, that doesn't mean you don't need protection at the end, unless it's a really big excavation. You have water coming down a slope, it's going to jump out. When to revegetate? Area final grade, most places it's 14 days unless it's paired water. It's 7 days, and I'm running out of time, so I'm going to go quick. Simple revegetation is 70% of existing vegetation. Two things. That 14 days doesn't mean at the end of 14 days you run a piece of equipment along the area and say, I'm good for another 14 days. Active work, almost daily in the area. Also, if the area was bare before you start it, doesn't mean you can just walk away. You must attempt revegetation. We're spending over $6 million right now, today, revegetating bare areas that have been bare for, I can't remember anybody that knows that there was grass there unless they were there when they built the road. And lack of dedicated water supply is a challenge. It's not an excuse. Example why revegetation is important. These slopes were side by side, same day, without mulch, 3 to 4 weeks growth. If you're doing a large area, and remember in the keynote he talked about roughening, well, you can do that for seeding. That gives you a better example of what happens. It collects the moisture, it collects the seed, you have faster germination. Here's kiewit out on Cam Highway watering the grass. So you can bring water in. Pair of devices. No duct tape. It constricts the roll, creates puka underneath. No plastic wrapping it. If you try to re-repair it, take the duct tape off. I will do a touchy-feely if I think there is duct tape under the fabric repair. So far, no one has told us we can't wrap it in fabric. But if you do, you ought to have at least a 6-inch overlap when you wrap it. Otherwise, they spring open and you have a pollutant with the mulch inside. Other methods. Zip tie if you can get it completely closed, or slip some more fabric over the area. Questions?